Welcome back to the Playeasy Warmup, the podcast where we dive into the stories, people, and passion driving the sporting event and tourism industry forward. I'm your host, Kerri Shields. Today's guest is someone at the forefront of one of the most exciting movements in American sports. I'm joined by Sean Hardy, Chief Growth Officer at League One Volleyball, also known as LOVE. LOVE is reimagining the volleyball experience from the ground up, building the largest network in volleyball in the country while launching a brand new professional women's indoor league that's already turning heads. With a community up model and some serious momentum, LOVE is doing more than just growing the game. They're changing how we think about athlete development, fandom, and impact. Sean brings a wealth of experience from years in the volleyball and sports world, and today he's here to talk about how League One Volleyball is shaking up the sport, what it takes to build something meaningful, and where the future of volleyball is headed. Let's get into it. Nothing brings people together like sports, and no place brings people together like the beach, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. There, you'll find first-class facilities and an experienced planning team that will make sure your sporting or esports event goes off without a hitch. And when the games end, the real play begins. With 60 miles of endless activities and entertainment, it's a guaranteed win for all ages. That's why you can't beat the beach. Start planning at myrtlebeachsports.com. Sean, welcome to the Playeasy Warmup Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start at the top. So could you tell us what is League One Volleyball and how is it shaking up things in the world of volleyball in the U.S.?
We like to kind of consider it as the ecosystem of volleyball from youth to pro. And we have a couple different businesses inside of that. Currently, there are 75 volleyball clubs from Miami, Florida to New York, from Seattle to LA that are League One owned volleyball clubs, still managed by their club directors out there. And they are developing young female athletes from the ages of 5 and under all the way up to 18 and under, and guiding them through the recruiting process if they want to go play at the collegiate level. And typically we own or lease out local facilities there in each of those markets. And then on top of that, we then bridge the gap between college and pro. League One has 6 pro volleyball franchises currently, one in Atlanta, one in Austin, one in Houston, one in Madison, Wisconsin, Omaha, Nebraska, and Salt Lake. We just finished our first season last year or this year, and then we will have 6 teams again in 2026. A little different format moving forward, but looking then to expand in 2027 to add more pro teams. And so a girl's journey can start, like I said, at 5 and play as long as they can, and it just shows that there's an opportunity outside of college and youth for these women to aspire to.
That's amazing, and congrats on finishing the first season. I know I got to see a few games, and it was cool to see. I come from a basketball background, but I have a lot of friends who played volleyball at the collegiate level, and so they were very excited that I was talking to you today, and just how cool it was, the excitement around the league and what you guys are building at League One Volleyball. And so you've had quite a career in the sport. What first sparked your passion for the sport, and how have you seen it grown just over the course of your career?
As I started, I was with Triple Crown Sports, and in 2013, the owner of Triple Crown came to me and said, Sean, I have 3 daughters, and so I'm being punished for something I did in my youth, but I wanted them to play a sport I didn't know anything about. And so my oldest daughter is now 33. She was 6 foot tall. She was tall as a young one. So we put her into volleyball and just had fun being a dad, watching it, even though I was in the event business and I come from the baseball, softball background. It was great just to show up and be a parent. But at that time, I was then going to all these tournaments and these different events out there. And the owner came to me and said, hey, why don't we start a volleyball division here at Triple Crown Sports? And so gave me a budget and gave me 3 years to try to pull it off. And so as I was out watching my daughters play and traveling with them. I was also building volleyball for Triple Crown Sports. And so Triple Crown runs the NIT, which is probably the most elite volleyball tournament in the country. It's in Kansas City over President's Day weekend. Every college coach in the country that's Division I shows up there, top competition early in the year, and just built some momentum with that, and then created a couple other events. Well, in partnering with trying to partner with that event, we had conversations with League One Volleyball, and knowing that they were going to put pro teams out there this past year, in the Kansas City Convention Center, there's an arena attached to the convention center. So my goal was, could I bring some pro in to play alongside all these kids that were coming in to play? And so I started dialogue there and built a relationship with League One, and they asked me to work from them about 3 years ago, and I said no. I wasn't leaving Triple Crown to go do that at that point in time. And then as of last October, we talked again, and I think it was the right timing. Triple Crown was in a really good place. They're doing some really good things. It was next time for new leadership over there to kind of take over and run that, and would give me some opportunity, as my title is with League One Chief Growth Officer, to really take this ecosystem of the 75 clubs, the pro teams, the tournaments, the showcase business, and really help these clubs expand and grow. And so that's how I ended up going over to League One, and it's been 6 months now there. And man, I've just spent most of it absorbing and learning from all of our club directors and finding out where we already run tournaments and facilities and all that good stuff. So it's been a whirlwind, but exciting and fun so far.
That's awesome. And I will say my dad is a father of 3 girls who all played the sport of basketball, and he is still coaching even after we have stopped playing. So it's cool to hear a girl dad. But so you spoke a little bit about just the ecosystem of League One Volleyball, and you've taken a different approach in terms of you're deeply integrating within the youth clubs with the professional teams. Why has that structure been so important to get right?
I think when League One started and the founding group was looking at ways to make it sustainable, making pro sustainable, because there's been some other leagues in the U.S. prior to League One, and also looking at maybe some models that had already happened in the past. The European model has the same system a little bit. Soccer does this same system in a little bit. And thought that if we were able to have the clubs and the pro together, could in all of our locations, our pro teams practice and use the club's facility. So when these girls that are 8, 12, 14, 18 come into practice and club, there's this participating pro level club. And you know, the first year, I think there were 17 Olympians that played on our teams. And so to be a young girl and be able to be in the same gym and see those girls train and their work ethic and all that, that was a bigger purpose than just making all this work. It was really aspiring and letting these girls know that there's other opportunities. So that was a lot different than maybe just building a pro team and recruiting your best college kids and not one's better than the other. I think our choice to do that gives us a little bit of a competitive advantage out there, and seems to really be gaining steam with the market. The more the girls and the different clubs see the product that's out there on the pro court, gives them a little extra push there to continue to grow and be better and work hard. So I think that was a huge piece for our leadership team, is to make sure that there was that connection.
It's incredible. And I think I read that this was the first year that I believe you had around 19 Olympic medals for the U.S. And those girls, it was the first time these professional athletes could come back and play in the United States after winning in the Olympics, and could come and play in the league that had just started in their inaugural season. And so to be able to be a young girl looking up and seeing like, this is what I could accomplish someday, I think is incredible, especially with the momentum that you have around women's sports right now. So how do you think League One Volleyball is capitalizing on this moment, and what role do you see volleyball playing in that movement?
When they started this idea like 5, 6 years ago, I don't think anybody realized how much women's sports would be at the forefront right now. So there's a little luck in that we were ahead of the game, I would say, a little bit in the idea that we could come back in and do this. And then in basketball, you started seeing the Caitlin Clark phenomenon and more and more viewers. And then PVF, another competitor of League One Volleyball, launched and gave these college girls a chance to continue to play. And then League One was able to launch and to expand into that. And each one of those pieces, along with just the growth of the youth sports volleyball, so travel volleyball, kids being able to play even locally or recreationally, or if they aspire to go on and play, continue on. That happened to be growing at the same time that some of these other things were happening in the marketplace. And then you start seeing sponsors pay a little bit more attention to women's sports and want to be attracted to that youth demographic. And so it wasn't like one big moment. It just seemed like the right timing, the right way to do it with the youth to pro model, and all the other things outside of our control, from the youth sports side and the women's sports side, that like was clicking and clicking and clicking. And so we're able to participate in that wave, and exciting to be able to be a part of it. And we hope we're helping that movement for women's sports in all sports, not just volleyball, continue here in the U.S.
And I think, just as a woman in sports, I get emotional thinking about just the rise of women's sports over the course of the last few years. And one that always comes to mind is, I believe there were 92,000 people that went to the volleyball game outside of Nebraska a few years ago, which as a young girl, I never was able to see just that kind of presence of women's sports and opportunity. And so for you guys to be a part of that movement is incredible. And I know we're talking a little bit about the pro side, and people don't know as much on your youth development club side. And so you host club events across the country. What makes a venue or a destination stand out for League One Volleyball?
Yeah, what was interesting about my when I came in, I didn't even realize how that ecosystem was working inside of our clubs. And so it took me a couple months to dive into, we own a volleyball club in Atlanta called A5. And it's a predominant volleyball club. And when you go to their website and look at their ecosystem and look at their medals and all the kids they get into college, what I didn't realize is they also run like 10 tournaments in and around the Atlanta area and within their own venue, but they also utilize smaller venues in that region. And then I went to Carolina Stars, which is another one of our clubs' website, and found out their ecosystem and that they run events. And so what was interesting is that at the time I came on, there's no central location to kind of find out what League One volleyball clubs do. You have to go to all 75 independent websites to find that out. And as I started digging in there, I was like, wow, and I come from the industry from a long time, going to all the shows and talking to all the CVBs and the sports commissions and seeing the venues. And when we were at Triple Crown Sports, we were specifically looking for these bigger venues of convention centers that had, 500,000 square feet of space, which at League One, we're still looking for those facilities out there and want the opportunity to play in those facilities. But what we didn't touch on is these 8-court to 16-court facilities out there. It just didn't make sense for Triple Crown to run tournaments in there. We couldn't scale enough to do that. But because we run these events through our clubs and we have these resources with a tournament director in Atlanta, a merchandise person in Atlanta, a person who understands how to facilitate a tournament in Atlanta, and then we have one in Houston, and we have tied in with all the clubs, that gave us a new opportunity to focus on maybe destinations and CVBs and communities that I specifically hadn't been looking for or targeting in the past. And so when I started looking at that ecosystem and saying, okay, where are you guys running and what kind of facilities? And if we run those 10, but we're growing, could I use another 8 court complex on the other side of town to grow that event? And after doing inventory, and again, we add new clubs all the time, so there's never like a stopping point of like, oh, I got my hands on this, I understand where it is. So making sure that we get as much information from these cities on their facilities and what's even in the hopper down the road. Like, what are they? Hey, we're going to build a new 8-court basketball facility, which is 16 volleyball, or 12 basketball, which is 24 volleyball. Being in some of those conversations and understanding how our ecosystem with our clubs, being in those regions. And in Ohio, for an example, we have 8 volleyball clubs in the state of Ohio. And so how do we then collaborate with 8 of the clubs to find out which of these communities in and around that region, it doesn't have to be in Ohio, but in that drivable region, where would they like to play? Could we save money by not having to travel all the way across the country on plane tickets, keep it cost savings for our families there, control some of the quality of the events that we want to see, quality of the competition inside of those events. So after the first 2 months of just learning and listening to these guys, I was like, wow, there's a huge opportunity to utilize lots of communities out there and a lot different facilities than I had been done before. And then that's when I reached out to Playeasy to talk through the possibility of how do I really educate and talk through and find out what is out there, because I wasn't looking for that in my old career. And the tournament directors and the people that are running the clubs are only looking inside their community. They're not looking outside of their community. So I was able to kind of start bridging that gap and finding or reaching out to other communities that might make sense for our clubs to operate. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be a tournament. We can do a showcase, a camp, a clinic, anything that brings in tourism into these things, to these communities or these facilities out there. And I would say the other thing that, because we own the club that's in that market, there's a long-term play there. It's not a situation where League One wants to bid out an event and move it around the country week in and week out. We would really like to partner with a good community, be there long-term, keep the date year over year over year, and grow it together. It's not about like how, it's more about partnership and relationships with these communities to make a long lasting event grow. And then maybe after that event grows, we add a weekend or we add a different date inside of that community. And we're almost an arm to help them build events inside that community for that facility because of our ecosystem of, right now it's 75 clubs. I would say by this time next year, it'll be between 110 and 125. So a lots more growth and opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really stood out just looking at your RFP that's currently open on Playeasy was the importance of the relationship building, and that you're not just looking for a one and done, but you're looking for a long-term partnership. What is the importance of building that partnership with that destination?
I think when you have two people with goals that align, right? The city's got the facility, they got the infrastructure, and they're really trying to bring in tourism into their community. We have clubs in that region who are looking for places to play. We have relationships with other clubs inside that region. It's really a great match to be able to tap into that. And when I was just with one company and I didn't have the relationship with the clubs as tightly as we do within all the Love clubs now. And so I think that's a unique advantage for League One to be able to help fill a facility inside of a community out there, and them understanding in this day and time, there's you see a lot of turnover, a lot of people switching jobs, and whether that be the hotel industry or the CVB or sports commission industry. And so doing long-term partnerships really shows that it's not just they would know that long-term we're in it to continue to grow those events, because if we overpromise, don't deliver, don't run a very good tournament, which sometimes can happen when you rotate cities. It's like, oh, I went in there, didn't work the way we want, tough, let's move on. We're more committed to, hey, didn't work the way we want. What do we need to do to be better? How do we collaborate to get this, bigger, or fix the things, because we are in those communities or close to those communities when we're not playing there, right? Like, you're part of that state or you're part of that community a lot of times. So I think that gives you better synergies of working together.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, even just being a part of this industry for the last 7 years since we started Playeasy, it seems like a much more common topic of conversation, fostering the sport and the organization within a community for those long-term partnerships. So it's always good to hear from both sides. And so when it comes to specifically finding your venues, are there anything specific for the facility or operational features that are essential for a successful volleyball event?
I think most of the people that are interested in hosting events have the nuances figured out, like good parking, easy access in and out. Is there enough lodging in the community to be able to host an event, and finding the right dates inside of those communities. There's times where there's dates open, but just doesn't make sense because either club volleyball is not happening or high school volleyball is not happening. And we're specifically focused on just that sport. So it limits us a little bit in programming out there. But some cases we get like, how high are the ceilings for volleyball, right? Because it needs to be 22 to 26 feet. If you're going to play older kids, it needs to be 26 to 30 feet in there. So sometimes we're limited on size there. But I would say that majority of the city-owned or private facilities that have been built that are, or convention centers or smaller convention centers, have been doing this long enough or were built with the intention of running these. And so most of that is the infrastructure is already there. In some of the facilities, the courts are there. So they're basketball courts and they drop down the volleyball pegs, or they're just full volleyball court facilities. In some cases, it can be just convention center space with concrete. And then we have the capability of bringing in our own courts and setting them up and getting them. So it doesn't have to be specifically a sports facility that already has the courts. It could be a situation where it's a convention center or a field house or something to that effect. I also think that some of these communities don't realize that we could partner with universities, right? A lot of these universities or bigger high schools and markets have 3 to 6 courts inside of their facility that, on top of 3 or 4 that they may have at another facility, ends up bringing enough courts into a market that you could run a pretty good event. We ask that there's about 8 courts would be the minimum inside of a city that we would be able to have access to be able to pull off a really good event.
Awesome. And I mentioned you currently have an open RFP on Playeasy, and it is a multi-event RFP. Is there any details that you would like to share about what you're looking for from the 2026 to 2028 timeframe?
So depending on a bit, what I really wanted to do there is show these partner cities, CVBs, that we were willing to work with them if they had open dates, not based off of just the volleyball season, and meaning we have club, but a lot of our coaches that coach inside of our clubs are high school coaches also. And so that extends our season if we want to partner and do a high school tournament. We have 3 or 4 clubs that run high school events inside of there. So that opened up some extra weekends, I'll call it, through there. And then, like I mentioned before, there's some dead periods where there's not a lot of tournaments going on, but there's a really good camp and clinic business, whether that be college camps or showcases that could happen and bring in individuals versus teams specifically. And so because of the ecosystem of all the Love clubs, could we have a central location where 10 of our clubs tell their kids that there's an opportunity to practice and showcase their skills in front of 25, 50 college coaches. And so that's a different event than what people are used to from the city or CVBs, where they're more looking at the tournament business out there. I just wanted them to know that there were opportunities. And then in some of these cases, there's an opportunity to run the tournament on Saturday, Sunday, and a camp or clinic on Friday or that following Monday to tie in with the people that are already there. And that way it saves the kid money. They were already traveling. They were already going there. I can just come in a little bit earlier on Friday and now get to showcase my skills or do some of those things there. So that's kind of why it was set up that way, is to make sure I didn't pigeonhole us into a certain month or a certain number of courts or a certain type of event.
Yeah. And it's funny when I hear, like, this is the perfect example for why we could never create the perfect RFP for an organization, and why we really stress just the connection piece, because at the end of the day, it's really just connecting with your needs for what you're looking for. And so digital tools have become essential for scaling sports organization like Playeasy. And so how has Playeasy helped with event visibility, operations, and destination discovery?
Well, for us, we at League One have a good idea of what facilities are in communities that we already run, right? So we know that piece pretty good. However, and then we also, when I was with Triple Crown Sports, we typically know where all the big convention centers are out there in the marketplace. What cities have these big convention centers? Lots of qualifiers are ran in those. National tournaments are ran in those. There's other big events. So that was, but I didn't have a mechanism to get into these smaller markets or mid markets and know exactly what they might have available, or there wasn't a resource for me to, I would have to Google each community. Is there anything in this town? And because of your guys' network of communities that you've already worked with and have been part of this, they've been able to put in their current assets and their current facilities and be able to network with new clients like me. So I was looking for a one stop where I could get, like you just said, never a right RFP. Because even when people, like, after I submit it, they're like, well, what do we need to do? And I was like, just have a conversation, because everything will be unique and different depending on time, location, all that stuff. So there wasn't this cookie cutter thing that just fit League One. But most of those communities that I talked to or were seeing at some of the other conferences at shows didn't realize that we ran 180 tournaments. League One already runs 180 weekend tournaments. And they didn't realize we own 75 clubs. Because of the pro side and the exposure that gets, it gets lost a little bit in the infrastructure that falls in below that. And Playeasy was a platform that allowed me to tell that story to the people that I didn't know already in the industry, or I didn't know that they may even have a facility that was capable of holding 8 courts or 16 courts. Or, like I mentioned before, if on this platform, knowing now that League One is in the market for running events like this, there's cities who are like, hey, in 2 more years, we're going to finish our construction of this 16-court facility there. And now I got a lead early of like, okay, hey, if we're looking at 2028, there's going to be this new 24-court facility. We can do a club there. We can do a couple showcases there. We can do this there. And I wouldn't have access to that knowledge if it wasn't a platform out there like Playeasy.
Well, that's great to hear. And obviously, the reason why we built Playeasy is exactly for these use cases, is the connecting this whole sports, tourism, and event industry. And so I always love to hear that. And so I know a big part of your organization and a personal motivation and mission is to bring the best event experience possible for all of the events that you run. Why is that important to you and for League One Volleyball? And how do you go about doing so?
I would say the interesting part of that is when I was with just a tournament business with Triple Crown Sports, we prided ourselves in running must-attend events where the customer left and they went and told 6 other people they should play in that event. And we only focused on big events. And when I came over to League One, what was interesting is the people that play in those events are also our customers in the club. So those parents are our parents. Those kids are our kids. We understand now, like, what are some of the needs are of their travel. Should we only play a 2-day tournament versus a 3-day tournament? These coaches that coach in those events are our coaches. And so some of them can't get off work on Friday night. Some can't afford the hotel right across the street from the venue. And when you understand that you're building something not just for everybody out there in the country, but you're building something for your family and your brother and your sister, and you really take it to the next level of like, okay, let me really think about that and not put them in that situation, or let's not schedule them at this time so they could drive in that morning. You would think different than just a tournament promoter out there that is just trying to run a weekend event and get as many people into town as possible. So as I came from a background that wanted to, I'll say, wow people on like bells, whistles, getting your schedule out early, all the little things right. I already came with that background, but when I learned and felt the nuances of the pain, or hearing stories of like, I would go to this tournament and they don't do this, it's not posted, there's no outcome, like whatever it is, I'm like, oh, wow. And this is our club that's feeling this pain. Let's create something for them, or let's really listen to those customers and try to build and create opportunities regionally that takes care of those needs and different situations that they want to play. So I think that's where the care and the pride and the camaraderie works really well.
And I think it's clear just from doing my research and preparing to speak to you, and just through watching the organization grow over the course of the past few months, that the people are really the core of everything that you do. And so just a credit to you guys as you continue to grow. And so I know you've mentioned a little bit about the upcoming growth of the organization, but if you could fast forward 5 years, what does success look like for League One Volleyball?
I would say that a thing that we haven't talked about is we also have a foundation inside of League One through our clubs and through our pro. And it really has an arm that helps kids that might not be able to afford to play or can play an opportunity to get involved in the sport. And it's already growing, but if we can let access to other girls that might not have access to it play, and we grow from that kind of care and kind of thought inside of that, and we acquire and partner with clubs that have that same values and mentality of servant leadership to these women, and care about their growth and development, not as just a volleyball player, but as a person and as about their self-esteem and things like that. And being able to hear from our pro down and some of the hardships that they had gone through to get where they are now allows those young women to know that these people that have made it to the highest level felt just like them when they were 10 or they were 12. And if you do that right, and you support each other with all of our clubs that we would have around the country, that growth will start happening automatically, a lot faster than you think. And now you get to pick the right partner and the right club and the right situation there that then again multiplies more and more. So I would say that if you looked up in 5 years, you're probably somewhere around 250 clubs in all parts of the country, from the most elite clubs out there to recreational participation. We have probably 16 to 24 pro volleyball teams that are and successful. And when I say successful, have engaged with the local clubs that they play in, support all the younger kids that are out there, have built a name for themselves of the Caitlin Clark type world of exposure to them. And it's sustained now over time where volleyball, especially in the pro side, hasn't lasted that long in the past. And so the way we get there is through some of those things I had mentioned earlier and before. But when you look up, all of a sudden it's this magic of these little details that have made you now a household name in volleyball, like the WNBA or NFL or Major League Baseball. And knowing that it's not just the top of the pyramid, it's also the bottom of the pyramid. And that's where the foundation is. The volume of our customers and people that pay memberships to play on a Love Club, it's for those reasons. And if you solve those reasons at the lower level, everything else will take care of itself moving up that pyramid.
That's amazing. And for anyone who wants to learn more, you guys do an unbelievable job at storytelling of some of those professional athletes that you were mentioning across all of your social media, your website. And so it's just great to see the presence of women who are doing great things and really leading this new world of professional volleyball. And as you said, starting from the ground. And so what is one thing that you wish more people understood about youth volleyball, or one takeaway?
I think for me, I didn't realize as a parent even, like, it's a tough sport. There's like understanding rotations and understanding the plays that they're running and understanding the blocks that are happening in front of you. And so the true like volleyball fan that would go like it takes you a while to understand the game and the strategy of what they're doing versus like just the entertainment factor of watching these. When I went to probably 10 of our pro matches, and when you're there in person, how physical and talented these ladies are was amazing to me. Like TV doesn't do any justice for that. And so when you talk about like an athlete and how they train and how they mentally prepare, and that happens down, even though they're not pros, that may happen down at the 10-year-old. They're learning how to pass correctly and how to get to the right spot on the court and seeing what's happening on it's a lot more than just hitting a ball back and forth or learning how to serve. And so I think that would be the thing that if you haven't been exposed to it or you don't have any daughters, once you realize, like I watch golf on TV and I'm like, oh, I can hit that round ball. But when you go do it, you're like, damn, that's a lot harder than those guys are making it look out there. I think volleyball is very similar to that, and want people to know that how talented and how much work these girls put in it to be. And so I keep saying girls. We do have boys programming too there. We have boys. It's just not quite as big. But anybody that plays that sport, that's amazing.
Yeah, I can attest to that. My roommates were volleyball players, and just the power and sheer athleticism of seeing it in person is incredible to see. So highly suggest not just following on TV or on social, but also getting to some games. And so I know you're fairly new to this position, but I always ask, what has been the biggest lesson you've learned on this journey?
I don't think it's a lesson as much as I did it before, but understanding the power of listening and really hearing, and not just listening to have somebody talk to you on the other side of the conversation. And I say that because each of these clubs that I work with to help them grow has a little bit different strategy, has a little bit different maybe economics of the kids that play in that club. And so nothing's the same. And so really taking the time in this first 6 months to be club centric and to listen and say, okay, how can I help? How can I build this? What are you guys strong at? And then how can they help? Because these club directors are willing to help other clubs that might be struggling at something. And so how do we use the network to share and help each other out? And so I think the biggest thing I learned is the amount of people that are willing to help and care and grow is way more than I thought. If you're just willing to sit down and listen and then collaborate on a way that all boats will rise. And I say that in regard to non-love clubs too. There's 8,000 volleyball clubs out there in the country. Love has 75. What's that? 1%? Not even 1% of the market. So even at a heyday, it would be 5%. But we could touch and help all these other clubs also through this process. And by listening and understanding even some of their needs creates new opportunities for League One. So I think that's been the biggest asset or the biggest thing that I've done. And it seems like sometimes I haven't done enough, like proactively, but it's taken so much time just to learn everybody's stuff. And so some of these cities and CVBs have like reached out to me, hey, we're ready. And I'm like, I'm just not, give me a little bit more time. I'm understanding this ecosystem a little bit better. And so I think that's where now I'm ready to start taking, now that I can understand that our love ecosystem, now I can start reaching out to some of these partners and cities that you guys have online and really dive into what their needs are. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? How much lodging do you have in that? What time of the year are you really looking for? Because then if that matches what Love has available, that's where the dream really happens and can work in a synergy to build something. So I think I want to take that learning and now ready to kind of take it to the CVB and the Sports Commission, the facility side, and see where that goes.
Yeah, I love that answer, and it's so applicable to just any job that you're in or just your everyday life. And so thank you for sharing. And thank you for taking the time today. This has been such a blast getting to know you and more about your organization. And so if anyone wants to get in touch with you, connect with you, where is the best place to do so?
I would say they can go to, like you mentioned, a good source is love.com, LOVB.com. There's lots of things there. But if you want to get specific to me, my email is just sean.hardy@lovb.com, and my name is SEAN. So that's an easy way, and always open, and we'll respond back, and love to chat. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't. But you never know until you collaborate.
Awesome. Well, Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast. I love it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Until next time. Bye.